Commander Jake Morrison walked through the massive corridors of the Galactic Council station, his boots making soft sounds on the polished metal floor. The station orbited around Kepler 442b, a planet that served as the neutral meeting ground for all the species in the galaxy. Jake had been chosen to represent Earth at this gathering, along with Dr. Lisa Carter and Captain Ben Hayes. The three humans felt very small among the towering alien beings that filled the halls. The council chamber was huge, with seats arranged in a circle that could hold representatives from over 50 different species. Jake took his place at the small section marked for Earth, while creatures that looked like they came from nightmares and dreams sat around him. The Xanthari ambassador sat to his right, his body made of what looked like living crystal that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. His name was difficult for humans to pronounce, so Jake just called him Ambassador in his mind. To his left sat the Vorthek representative, a massive creature that stood nearly 10 feet tall with 4 thick arms and skin that looked like gray leather. The Vorthak had been warriors for thousands of years, and their reputation for building the largest warships in the galaxy was well known. Other species filled the remaining seats, each one more alien than the last. The meeting began with the usual formalities. The council leader, a thin being with 6 legs and a voice that sounded like music, called for order. Jake listened as different species reported on their military capabilities and what they could contribute to the Galactic Defense Network. The Xanthari spoke of their crystal ships that could slice through enemy armor like knives through paper. The Vorthak boasted about their massive dreadnoughts that could destroy entire planets. When it came time for Jake to speak, he stood up and cleared his throat. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to the human representative. Jake had prepared his speech carefully, knowing that this might be Earth's only chance to prove that humans belonged in this galactic community. Earth offers its naval traditions and maritime expertise to the galactic defense effort. Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. For thousands of years, humans have mastered the art of warfare on our planet's oceans. We have learned to fight on the surface, beneath the waves, and in the air above the water. The moment he mentioned ships that sailed on water, the Xanthari ambassador made a sound that the translation system converted into laughter. The crystal being's body flashed with bright colors as he spoke. You speak of ships that sail on water. Primitive vessels that cannot even leave your planet's surface? How quaint that you think floating on liquid surfaces has any relevance to void warfare. The Vorthek representative joined in, his forearms gesturing dismissively. These humans and their maritime heritage. They expect us to believe that floating on liquid surfaces somehow translates to combat in the vacuum of space. We have been fighting among the stars for millennia while they splash around in their planetary puddles. Jake felt his face grow hot with embarrassment, but he continued. Our naval traditions have taught us about strategy, about patience, about striking from unexpected angles. We have learned to hunt enemies who cannot see us coming. This brought even more laughter from the assembled aliens. A creature that looked like a walking tree spoke up, its voice like wind through leaves. Hunt, such a primitive concept. Civilized species engage in honorable combat, fleet against fleet, with proper formations and tactical doctrines. Dr. Lisa Carter stood up beside Jake, her scientific mind trying to find a way to explain human naval warfare to beings who had never experienced oceans. What Commander Morrison is trying to explain is that humans have developed unique approaches to three-dimensional combat. Our submarines can remain hidden beneath the surface for months, striking without warning and disappearing before the enemy can respond. The Xanthari ambassador's crystal body flashed with what seemed like amusement. Hiding beneath a liquid surface is not the same as maneuvering in the infinite depths of space. Your submarines are trapped in 2 dimensions, moving only along the surface of your planet. Space combat requires true 3-dimensional thinking. Captain Ben Hayes, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. His voice was calm and measured, showing none of the anger that Jake felt building inside him. With respect, Ambassador, you might be surprised by what human naval tactics can accomplish when properly adapted. The Vorthek representative made a sound that might have been a snort. Adapted. You speak as if your primitive water fighting has any relevance to modern warfare. Our ships are equipped with weapons that can destroy entire star systems. Our armor can withstand the heat of a dying star. What could your water boats possibly teach us about combat among the stars? Jake tried one more time to explain. Human naval warfare is not just about the ships themselves. It's about the strategies we have developed over centuries of fighting. On and under the water, we have learned to use stealth, to coordinate attacks from multiple directions, to strike at supply lines and disappear before the enemy can retaliate. The council chamber filled with what sounded like alien laughter. Even the more peaceful species seemed amused by the human claims. The musical voice of the council leader rose above the noise. The humans have presented their capabilities. We thank Earth for its willingness to contribute to galactic defense. Jake realized that they were being dismissed, politely but firmly. The council leader continued, Earth will be granted observer status in the Galactic Defense Network. Should the situation become desperate enough to require primitive tactics, we will certainly consider human input. As the meeting moved on to other business, Jake sat back down, his face burning with shame and anger. He could feel the eyes of the other species on him, some amused, others pitying. Dr. Carter reached over and squeezed his hand gently, while Captain Hayes leaned close and whispered, Let them laugh now. They have no idea what's coming. The rest of the session passed in a blur. Jake barely listened as the various species discussed their patrol routes, their weapon technologies, and their grand strategies for defending the galaxy. Everything they talked about seemed to involve massive fleets meeting in open battle, with the strongest ships and the biggest weapons determining the winner. When the meeting finally ended, Jake walked out of the chamber with his head held high, despite the whispers and chuckles that followed the human delegation. As they made their way back to their quarters, Dr. Carter shook her head in frustration. They think in terms of surface warfare even in space? They have no concept of the advantages that stealth and surprise can provide. Captain Hayes nodded grimly. They fight like armies, not like navies. They've never had to deal with an enemy that can appear from nowhere, strike hard, and vanish without a trace. Jake looked out through the station's viewing ports at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, threats were gathering that would test the galaxy's defenses. When that time came, he suspected that the aliens who had laughed at human naval traditions would discover that the ocean's lessons applied just as well to the vast depths of space. The galaxy had mocked human myths about warfare on the water, but Jake knew that those myths were about to become reality among the stars. 3 months after the humiliating council meeting, Admiral Patricia Wells stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. The facility had been built inside an underwater mountain, its corridors carved from solid rock and reinforced with the strongest materials Earth could produce. She had once commanded nuclear submarines in these same waters, hunting enemy vessels in the cold darkness below the waves. Now she faced a different kind of enemy, one that came from the stars themselves. The first reports had arrived through the quantum communication networks just hours earlier. The messages were fragmented, filled with panic and desperation. The hegemony had struck without warning, their invasion fleet emerging from the dark matter clouds beyond the galactic rim, like a swarm of hungry insects. Patricia read the reports with growing concern, her experienced eye picking out the tactical details that others might miss. Colonel Rick Johnson burst into the command center, his face pale with shock. Admiral, we're getting reports from 17 different star systems. The hegemony hit them all at once. The Xanthari crystal ships are being torn apart by some kind of bioweapon. The Vorthek dreadnoughts are being overwhelmed by swarm tactics. Patricia nodded grimly as she studied the tactical displays. The screen showed the positions of various galactic fleets, most of them now marked with red symbols indicating heavy damage or complete destruction. How many ships have we lost so far? The Xanthari have lost their entire third fleet, Johnson replied, consulting his datapad. 18 crystal ships, gone in the first hour. The Vorthak are reporting that their flagship has been destroyed, along with 6 of their heavy cruisers. The other species are falling back to defensive positions, but the hegemony is moving too fast for them to organize a proper response. Commander Amy Parker entered the room, carrying a stack of intelligence reports. She had been Patricia's communications officer when they served together on submarines, and now she coordinated Earth's information networks. "The aliens are fighting exactly like we predicted they would," she said, spreading the reports across the main table. "They're forming up in traditional battle lines, trying to meet the hegemony head-on with superior firepower." Patricia studied the tactical data, her mind automatically translating the three-dimensional space battles into terms she understood. "They're fighting like surface ships from the old days," she murmured. "Big formations, direct confrontation, whoever has the biggest guns wins. They have no idea how to deal with an enemy that refuses to fight by their rules." The quantum communicator crackled to life, and Jake Morrison's voice filled the command center. He was still aboard the Galactic Council station, trying to coordinate some kind of response to the invasion. "Admiral Wells, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. 14 colonies have fallen in the past 6 hours. The hegemony forces are using hit-and-run tactics, striking at supply lines and communication nodes before disappearing back into the void." Patricia smiled grimly. "Sounds familiar. What are the galactic fleets doing about it?" "They're chasing shadows," Jake replied, his voice tight with frustration. "The hegemony appears out of nowhere, hits a target, and vanishes before our allies can respond. The alien commanders are demanding that the enemy stand and fight like civilized beings. They don't understand that this is exactly how the enemy wants to fight." Colonel Johnson shook his head in disbelief. "They're complaining because the enemy won't cooperate with their battle plans. It's like they've never heard of guerrilla warfare, or submarine warfare," Patricia added quietly. She walked over to the main display, where a holographic map showed the current positions of all known forces. The hegemony attacks were marked with pulsing red dots appearing and disappearing across the galaxy like deadly fireflies. "Amy, what do we know about these hegemony forces?" Commander Parker pulled up a detailed analysis on her screen. "They're insectoid, highly organized, and they operate in swarms. Their ships are biological, grown rather than built, and they can adapt quickly to new situations. Intelligence suggests they've been preparing for this invasion for decades, studying galactic military doctrine and developing tactics specifically designed to counter traditional fleet warfare." Patricia nodded slowly. "They're fighting smart. They've identified the weaknesses in galactic military thinking, and they're exploiting them ruthlessly. The question is, can we do something about it?" The answer came in the form of another urgent message from the Galactic Council. The Vorthak representative, his voice distorted by damage to his ship's communication systems, was demanding immediate reinforcements. "The humans," he said, his words barely audible through the static. "Where are their warships? We need every available vessel." Patricia exchanged glances with her staff. The alien had dismissed human naval capabilities just months ago, but now he was begging for help. "Tell him we're preparing our response," she said to Amy. "But don't give him any details about our capabilities." Colonel Johnson looked puzzled. "Admiral, what response?" "We don't have any ships in space yet. The construction yards are still working on the prototypes." Patricia walked over to a secure terminal and entered her authorization codes. The screen displayed a classified file marked Project Deep Strike. "Rick, we've been building more than prototypes. For the past 5 years, we've been developing a completely new approach to space warfare, based on lessons learned from 2 centuries of submarine operations." The file opened to reveal technical specifications for vessels unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. These were not the massive dreadnoughts favored by the Vorthak, nor the elegant crystal ships of the Xanthari. These were sleek, dark vessels, designed for stealth and surprise, equipped with advanced sensors and weapon systems that could strike from the shadows. "The USV Leviathan launched last month," Patricia continued, using the traditional naval designation for United Space Vessel. She's already in position near the Hegemony advance routes along with 11 other vessels. The crews have been training for exactly this kind of warfare. Commander Parker stared at the specifications in amazement. These ships are designed to hunt, not to fight in formation. They can operate independently for months, striking at targets of opportunity and disappearing before the enemy can respond. Just like our submarines, Patricia said with satisfaction. The aliens think in terms of fleets and formations, but we think in terms of individual hunters. Each of our ships is a predator trained to stalk its prey patiently and strike without warning. The quantum communicator crackled again, this time with a message from Captain Steve Adams aboard the USV Leviathan. Admiral, we have the Hegemony supply convoy in sight. 12 vessels, heavily loaded, minimal escort. Request permission to engage. Patricia smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Permission granted, Captain. Show them what human naval warfare looks like. The war was about to take a very different turn. Captain Steve Adams drifted in the darkness between two dead moons, his ship USV Leviathan running completely silent. The vessel had been designed to disappear in the vast emptiness of space, its hull coated with materials that absorbed sensor waves and scattered them harmlessly into the void. For 3 days, his crew of 43 had maintained absolute silence, communicating only through hand signals and written notes when necessary. The bridge was lit only by the soft glow of passive sensors, their displays showing the surrounding space in shades of green and blue. Steve watched the tactical screen as 12 Hegemony vessels approached their position, their bioships pulsing with organic energy signatures that his sensors could detect from millions of kilometers away. The enemy convoy was heading toward the Altarian system, carrying supplies and reinforcements for the invasion forces that had already overwhelmed the local defenses. Lieutenant Commander Kate Williams sat at the sensor station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she tracked the approaching vessels. She had served on nuclear submarines before joining the space program, and she understood the patience required for this kind of hunting. Her voice was barely a whisper as she reported. To Steve, contact bearing 270, range decreasing. 12 vessels in formation, estimated speed 0.3 light. They're following the predicted course. Steve nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the display. The Hegemony ships were massive, their organic hulls bristling with weapons and defensive systems. Each vessel was easily 3 times the size of the Leviathan, and they carried enough firepower to destroy entire planets. But size and firepower meant nothing. If the enemy could not find their target, the convoy passed within 50,000 kilometers of the Leviathan's position, close enough for Steve to see the details of their bioships on the visual display. The vessels looked like enormous insects, their hulls covered in chitinous armor that shifted and moved like living tissue. Weapon ports opened and closed along their sides like breathing gills, and their engines left trails of bioluminescent particles in the darkness. They have no idea we're here, whispered Communications Officer Danny Clark, his voice filled with amazement. Their sensors are sweeping right past us. Steve allowed himself a small smile. The Hegemony had adapted their tactics to fight against the conventional fleets of the galaxy, but they had never encountered an enemy that could become invisible in the depths of space. Their sensors were designed to detect the massive energy signatures of traditional warships, not the carefully concealed presence of a vessel running silent. The convoy continued on its course, and Steve began to prepare for the attack. He had studied the enemy formation carefully, identifying the weak points where his ship could strike with maximum effect. The Hegemony vessels traveled in a loose cluster, their attention focused on the space ahead rather than the darkness around them. All stations, prepare for attack, Steve whispered into his headset. Weapons, load tubes 1 through 6 with Mark 7 torpedoes. Engineering, prepare for emergency power. Helm, plot an intercept course for the lead vessel. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, their training taking over despite the alien nature of their target. These men and women had learned their skills in the submarine service, where a single mistake could mean death in the crushing depths of Earth's oceans. Now they applied those same skills to the infinite depths of space. The Leviathan's torpedo tubes were loaded with weapons that had been designed specifically for this kind of warfare. Each torpedo was equipped with advanced guidance systems and powerful warheads that could penetrate the bio-armor of hegemony vessels. More importantly, the torpedoes were virtually undetectable until the moment of impact, their own stealth systems making them invisible to enemy sensors. Steve watched as the convoy passed the optimal firing position. "Fire tubes 1 and 2. He ordered quietly. "Target the lead vessel." The torpedoes launched silently, their drives producing no visible exhaust or detectable energy signature. They accelerated toward their target at incredible speed, their guidance systems adjusting course to compensate for the movement of the enemy vessels. The hegemony convoy continued on its path, completely unaware that death was racing toward them through the darkness. The first torpedo struck the lead vessel amidships, penetrating its bio-armor and detonating deep within its hull. The explosion tore through the ship's organic structure, causing secondary blasts as internal systems failed. The second torpedo hit moments later, finishing the job and sending the massive vessel tumbling into the void. The remaining hegemony ships reacted with panic, their formations breaking apart as they tried to identify the source of the attack. Their sensors swept the surrounding space frantically, but the Leviathan had already moved to a new position, its engines running at minimum power to avoid detection. "Fire tubes 3 and 4, Steve ordered, targeting the second vessel in the convoy. "Then prepare to move to attack position Beta." The second attack was even more devastating than the first. The targeted vessel exploded in a shower of bioluminescent debris, its destruction visible from millions of kilometers away. The surviving hegemony ships began to panic, their tight formation dissolving as each captain tried to protect his own vessel. Steve watched with satisfaction as the enemy convoy scattered in all directions. "They're running blind," he observed. "They have no idea where the attacks are coming from." The Leviathan continued its deadly work, striking again and again from different positions. Each attack lasted only seconds, with the ship firing its weapons and then disappearing back into the darkness before the enemy could respond. The hegemony vessels fired their weapons randomly into empty space, their powerful guns lighting up the void with brilliant flashes that only served to reveal their own positions. Within 20 minutes, 8 of the 12 hegemony vessels had been destroyed. The remaining 4 were fleeing toward the nearest star system, their crews too terrified to maintain formation. Steve considered pursuing them, but his orders were clear: hit the enemy hard and disappear before they could organize a response. "All stop," he ordered. "Secure from attack stations. Communications, prepare a message for Admiral Wells." As the Leviathan drifted back into the darkness, Steve composed his report. The first engagement had been a complete success, proving that human naval tactics could be devastatingly effective against an enemy that had never learned to fight in 3 dimensions. The hegemony had adapted to fight galactic fleets, but they had no defense against predators that struck from the shadows. The galaxy was about to learn that the humans had brought more than just myths to the war. They had brought the patience of the deep, the silence of the hunt, and the sudden violence of the kill. Commander Nick Taylor had been tracking the hegemony battle group for 6 days, his ship USV Shark moving silently through the asteroid field that bordered the Kepler system. His squadron of 5 vessels had been coordinating their movements through encrypted burst transmissions, each ship taking turns to monitor the enemy, while the others remained hidden in the shadows of the floating rocks. The hegemony force consisted of 15 vessels, including 2 massive bio-cruisers that served as command ships for the invasion fleet. These were not supply convoys like the ones that other human ships had been attacking, but frontline combat vessels equipped with the most advanced weapons and defensive systems that the insectoid species could produce. The enemy had learned from their recent losses and had begun traveling in stronger formations with better sensor coverage. Taylor studied the tactical display on his bridge, where the positions of his squadron were marked with blue dots while the enemy vessels showed as red symbols moving slowly through the asteroid field. The USV Mako, commanded by Lieutenant Sarah Johnson, was positioned on the far side of the enemy formation, while the USV Barracuda under Commander Kate Williams held the flanking position near a cluster of larger asteroids. "Signal from Mako," reported Communications Officer Brian Cooper, his voice barely audible in the quiet bridge. "Enemy formation is adjusting course toward the inner system. They're moving to attack the mining stations." Taylor nodded slowly, his mind calculating the timing and positioning required for the attack he had been planning. The hegemony vessels were moving in a tight defensive formation, their bioships clustered together so that their defensive systems could overlap and protect each other. It was a smart tactical decision that would make them difficult to attack using conventional methods, but Taylor was not planning a conventional attack. He had studied the old naval battles from Earth's history, learning how submarine Wolfpacks had hunted enemy convoys during the ancient world wars. The principle was simple: coordinate multiple attacks from different directions to overwhelm the enemy's ability to respond effectively. "All vessels, this is Pack Leader," Taylor transmitted on the encrypted channel. "Prepare for coordinated attack. Execute Wolfpack Pattern 7 on my mark." The response came back immediately from his 4 squadron mates. Each captain confirmed their readiness and reported their current positions relative to the enemy formation. Taylor had trained with these officers for months, practicing the complex maneuvers required to coordinate attacks across vast distances of space. The USV Hammerhead, commanded by Captain Lovra Davis, was positioned below the enemy formation, hidden in the shadow of a massive asteroid that was slowly rotating as it tumbled through space. The USV Stingray under Commander Ryan Clark had taken position above the hegemony vessels, using the debris field from a destroyed mining station as cover. "Mark," Taylor transmitted, and 5 human vessels began their approach simultaneously. The attack began with the Hammerhead launching its torpedoes from below, the weapons racing upward toward the belly of the lead biocruiser. The hegemony vessel detected the incoming missiles and began evasive maneuvers, its organic hull rippling as internal systems redirected power to defensive systems. But the first attack was just a distraction, while the enemy focused on the threat. From below, the Stingray attacked from above, its weapons striking at the biocruiser's upper hull where the defensive systems were weakest. The massive vessel shuddered under the impact, its bioluminescent markings flashing in patterns that indicated severe damage. Taylor brought the Shark in from the port side, targeting the second biocruiser as it tried to turn to face the multiple threats. His torpedoes struck the vessel's weapon ports, causing secondary explosions that spread along the ship's hull like a disease. The organic armor began to peel away in great sheets, revealing the vulnerable internal structure beneath. The Mako and Barracuda completed the coordinated attack, striking at the escort vessels that were trying to protect the larger ships. The hegemony formation, which had seemed so strong and disciplined just moments before, began to break apart as individual captains tried to deal with threats coming from every direction. "They can't target all of us at once," observed Tactical Officer Mike Stevens as he watched the enemy vessels spinning in confusion. "Their weapons are designed for frontal assault, not for dealing with attacks from multiple vectors." Taylor smiled grimly as he watched the battle unfold. The hegemony ships were powerful, but they had been designed to fight enemies that would face them directly in traditional battle lines. They had never encountered an enemy that could attack from their blind spots and flanks simultaneously. The biocruiser that the Hammerhead had first targeted was now listing badly, its organic systems failing as the damage spread through its hull. The second biocruiser was trying to retreat, but the Shark's continued attacks had damaged its propulsion systems, leaving it vulnerable to follow-up strikes from the other human vessels. "All ships, continue the attack," Taylor ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The 5 human vessels continued their deadly dance, appearing from behind asteroids to launch their attacks before disappearing back into the shadows. The hegemony escorts tried to form a protective screen around their damaged command ships, But they were too few and too confused to establish an effective defense. Within 15 minutes, both biocruisers had been destroyed, their massive hulls breaking apart as internal explosions tore through their organic structure. The remaining escort vessels were fleeing in different directions, their formation completely shattered by the coordinated assault. Taylor watched with satisfaction as the last enemy vessel disappeared into hyperspace, its crew too demoralized to continue the fight. "All ships, report status," he ordered. The responses came back quickly. All 5 human vessels had survived the battle with minimal damage, their stealth systems having protected them from the worst of the enemy fire. The hegemony had lost 17 ships, including 2 of their most powerful command vessels. "Signal to Admiral Wells," Taylor told his communications officer. "Wolfpack 7 has completed its mission. Enemy battle group destroyed with no friendly casualties." As the squadron regrouped in the shadow of the asteroid field, Taylor reflected on what they had accomplished. The hegemony had believed that their superior numbers and firepower would guarantee victory against any enemy. They had never imagined that they might face opponents who could strike from multiple directions simultaneously, overwhelming their defenses through coordination rather than brute force. The galaxy was beginning to understand that human naval warfare was not about having the biggest ships or the most powerful weapons. It was about patience, coordination, and the ability to strike at the enemy's weakest points when they least expected it. The hegemony was learning this lesson the hard way, one destroyed fleet at a time. The Swarm Queen stood on the bridge of her flagship, her chitinous body trembling with rage as she received the latest reports from her invasion fleet. 3 more battle groups had been destroyed in the past week, their bioships torn apart by an enemy that struck without warning and vanished before her forces could respond. The carefully planned invasion that should have conquered the galaxy in months was falling apart piece by piece. "Where are they?" she clicked, her mandibles sharp with frustration. "Our sensors detect nothing, yet our ships burn like dying stars across the void." Her second-in-command, a smaller male with scarred chitin, approached cautiously. "My queen, our intelligence suggests that the humans are responsible for these attacks. Their primitive waterships have somehow been adapted for void warfare." The Swarm Queen's eyes blazed with fury. "Impossible. We studied their capabilities thoroughly before beginning the invasion. They have no fleet, no weapons that could threaten our bioships. They are insects barely worthy of notice." But the evidence was mounting that something had changed. The human vessels appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating precision, and disappeared back into the darkness before any pursuit could be organized. The hegemony's conventional tactics, which had proven so effective against the other galactic species, seemed useless against these phantom attackers. The Queen made a decision that would determine the fate of the war. "Prepare the Great Swarm," she ordered. "We will strike at the source of these attacks. If we destroy their homeworld, their mysterious ships will have nowhere to return." 300 hegemony vessels began to gather at the edge of the galaxy, the largest concentration of bioships ever assembled. The Queen herself would lead this final assault, determined to crush the humans once and for all. The fleet included her most powerful warforms, bioships that had been grown specifically for planetary destruction on Earth. Admiral Patricia Wells received the intelligence reports in her underground command center. The quantum sensors had detected the massive hegemony fleet massing for an attack on the solar system. She studied the tactical displays with the calm efficiency that had made her one of the finest submarine commanders in human history. 300 ships, she murmured to Colonel Rick Johnson, who stood beside her monitoring the incoming data. "The Queen is bringing everything she has left." Johnson shook his head in amazement. "The Galactic Council is calling it hopeless. They're evacuating their representatives and pulling back their remaining fleets to defend their homeworlds." Patricia smiled coldly. "Good, let them run. This is exactly what we've been preparing for." Commander Amy Parker entered the command center carrying a secure communication device. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender demands from the Hegemony Queen. She's offering to spare Earth if we reveal the locations of our hidden fleet." Tell her we'll consider it, Patricia replied. But first, she have to come and get us. The hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their bioships spreading out in a massive formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. The Swarm Queen had positioned her most powerful vessels at the front, confident that their overwhelming firepower would quickly crush any resistance. Scan for enemy vessels, the Queen ordered her sensor operators. The humans must have hidden their fleet somewhere in this system. The biosensors swept across the solar system, searching for any sign of the mysterious human warships. They detected the usual traffic around Earth and its colonies, but nothing that resembled a military fleet. The asteroids between Mars and Jupiter showed no unusual activity, and the outer planets appeared to be completely undefended. Nothing, my queen, reported the sensor chief. If they have ships, they are too well hidden for our instruments to detect. The Swarm Queen studied the tactical display, her compound eyes analyzing every detail of the solar system. Begin the advance. We will sweep through the system planet by planet until we find their hiding places. But as the hegemony fleet moved deeper into the solar system, Admiral Wells was putting the final touches on her battle plan. All vessels, this is Deep Blue, she transmitted on the encrypted command frequency. Time to surface. The response was immediate and overwhelming. From the asteroid belt, from the moons of Jupiter, from the shadow of Saturn's rings, human warships began to reveal themselves. Not the few dozen vessels that the galaxy expected, but over 200 ships that had been hiding in plain sight throughout the solar system. Captain Tony Miller brought the USV Kraken out from behind the largest asteroid in the belt, its weapons systems already charging for battle. Commander Helen Ross coordinated the flanking maneuvers from the USV Nautilus, while Captain Greg Foster prepared the USV Typhoon for the devastating attack that would break the enemy formation. The hegemony fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by enemies that had appeared from every direction. The Swarm Queen's confident advance turned into chaos as human vessels attacked from the asteroids, from the planetary moons, and from the dark spaces between the worlds. Impossible, the Queen screamed as her sensors finally began to detect. The human fleet, where did they all come from? The answer came in the form of coordinated attacks that struck at every weak point in the hegemony formation. The human ships used tactics that the insectoid species had never encountered, appearing from multiple directions to overwhelm individual targets before disappearing back into the cosmic shadows. Captain Foster's Typhoon launched the attack that history would remember as the Depth Charge Strike, a coordinated barrage of weapons that had been adapted from ancient anti-submarine warfare. The attack pattern created a cascading series of explosions that tore through the heart of the hegemony formation, destroying dozens of bioships in a matter of minutes. The Swarm Queen's flagship was the last to fall, its massive biohull cracking under the combined assault of 12 human vessels. As her ship broke apart around her, the Queen finally understood what had happened. The humans had not built a traditional fleet at all, but had created a three-dimensional battlefield that turned the entire solar system into their hunting ground. Commander Jake Morrison, now wearing the insignia of a fleet admiral, appeared on the communication screen of the Galactic Council station. The alien representatives who had once laughed at human naval traditions now stared at him with a mixture of awe and fear. "You mocked our myths," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying across the galaxy. "But you forgot that on Earth, the sea has always been our highway. In its depths, we learn to be patient, to be silent, and to strike without warning. The galaxy is just another ocean, and humanity has found its perfect hunting ground. The war was over, and the galaxy would never underestimate human naval traditions again."